All right. I think we're good to go. And I'll turn my camera on so you guys know I'm not an imposter. Okay. So it's kind of free form today. This meeting, this training session is at the request of SWAPTE based on the training completion rate reports that went out, I think a week ago, 2 weeks ago, is time real. But at some point, I sent out some training completion reports. Those are based on the QRA, which is one of the various audits that the federal government undertakes and assigns to me to deal with. So we're going to cover a lot of topics today. We're going to do the full case management training. We're going to discuss case notes. We're going to discuss documents. We're going to discuss suitability and system closures, and we're going to discuss performance. Afterwards, I'm going to do a demo. I don't believe this group has need of the full demo, nor am I entirely prepared to provide it. But I will go in and have a test client up, show you all the most important parts of the system, show you where all the performance comes in, and like all the various things I mentioned throughout the presentation. And because there's not a ton of us, and this is essentially for y'all's benefit, if you do have a question, go ahead and just raise your digital hand. Now, Todd and Kimberly, if y'all could lower your hands just in case you do have a question down the road, I don't want to just disregard you. But yeah, if anybody has a question or anything like that, you can type it in the chat box. You can, send it through with the little raise hand emoji thing, and we'll get that figured out. So let's jump into it. Case management training. So I am the manager. I was promoted January 1st, and now an official manager of the state reporting section. So currently that includes Cecily Norsworthy, who many of you are probably familiar with, and Kristen Wright, who some of you may know as well. Those are my two head auditors and reporters, and they also run the help desk for WIOA programs. So great ladies, very knowledgeable. So if you have any questions, feel free to send those into the help desk, and those will get routed. If you have something of a more technical concern or something that you just think is a little more advanced or whatever, you can also email me. I'm not queued into the help desk because I don't want any part of that nightmare. But feel free to email me on a day-to-day basis, and whenever you need anything, that's what we're here for. We're essentially the technical assistance arm, in addition to the auditing arm. I think that's a good approach, because I, for one, when I was a case manager, which I was for 4 years with DHR, so I've been there. I always felt like the people who were writing me up for things should also be the people answering questions about things, and that's kind of how we have it set up. So, if there are any other questions, we'll just jump right in. It starts with a disclaimer, right? So this training in particular only applies to WIOA Title I programs. Now, if you're using the system, for example, if you have a Wagner-Pfizer program or trade program or an apprenticeship or anything like that, some of these things are going to apply, right? Because it's one system. But in general, what I'm talking about, especially with the policy and procedures that are in this training, is actually just focused on Title I. You'll notice I specifically say that it does not apply to AWSP. That is Miss Terry's baby, and I'm very happy to see it on weekends and Sundays and not have to deal with it every day. So you can address the AWSP questions to her. But anyway, moving on. Okay, we're going to start with a broad discussion of strategy. Um, you know, Case management is how we serve our customers, right? And the best way to do that is to have a comprehensive strategy for every participant that you have. I also feel like this is something that is missed a lot of the times when we're doing our day-to-day, everything starts seeing like the same and things just start flowing together and you have like this client at this time, this client at that time. We can lose sight of the strategic elements of case management, right? So these are the three most important ones. So of course there's intake and suitability. Intake is the most important part of every case. It truly is. The performance is not going to be good if you don't do a good intake. The services are not going to be right if you don't do a good intake. And the outcomes for the client are not going to be beneficial if you don't do a good intake, right? That's an excellent method of observing the client's behaviors, their skill set, their dedication to a sustainable career path. But most importantly, it is also when we perform suitability. Now, I have 4 full slides on suitability that have been added to this training. So if you haven't been to one of my trainings in the past year, this one's going to look a little bit different. There's a lot more information. Unfortunately, I had to take out a lot of the jokes because the training was getting too long and I was getting kind of like dirty looks from the other trainers, which is fair. But I thought they were good jokes. See my former material if you're interested in those jokes. But anyway, suitability, right? That is the only time that a case manager can lawfully refuse services to an otherwise eligible participant. That's critical, right? That's critical. Just because someone comes into your office and is proven eligible does not mean that they're suitable for every type of service that you may provide, right? That's key. Some individuals may not have the skill sets. Some individuals may not have the type of behaviors, right? Or be prepared to enter the workplace as it is, right? And some individuals just don't have like other types of requirements, right? For specific trainings. There's a lot, we always talk about if a type of career is very physically demanding, that not every individual can fit those needs, right? Welding is an example, truck driving is another example. Like, don't have a narcoleptic like me become a truck driver. That's not going to work out well for anybody. So we'll go into that in detail towards the end of the slideshow, but it's such an important point that I wanted to mention it right here because it is part of strategy, right? Making sure a client is suitable for training betters your chances of having that training complete successfully, right? It increases your credential count, it increases your MSG count, and ultimately it's going to increase your employment rate because those clients were ready to work, right? If they're not suitable, we should have other services being provided that help them become suitable, right? We call these soft skills training, employability training, right? Mentorship, leadership training, that type of thing. Supportive services. If an individual just doesn't have the correct attire for the type of job they want, that's something that's in the budget. We can help them get within reason a certain set of like career clothes, interview clothes, that type of thing. So anyway, there's a lot of examples of that, and we'll go into it in a bit. Sustainable career planning. So I think I stole this slide from my youth slide, so it says specifically youth, but it's for everybody, right? Sustainable career planning for disadvantaged individuals, right, involves empowering them to identify and pursue the types of paths that don't just align with their interests and skills, but also align with that high wage, high demand market occupation, right? That's what we're always talking about. It's one of the core tenets of WIOA, right? So that also encompasses providing the other types of services that I just discussed, right? Career exploration. You should be doing career guidance, maybe mentorship if it's somebody who's never worked before or has limited occupational experience, right? And then even educational resources. Those are all types of things that we can provide to not just put a client in a job, but to improve the client's probability of success within their career, right? I always say we should be working from the heart. If you don't have an kind of empathetic heart that truly wants your clients to succeed, that wants to make the world a better place, that wants to make a difference in an individual who is low income, who is a single mother, who is struggling to feed his children, that type of thing, then this isn't the career for you. I'll just say that. There's probably other paths for you. But I truly believe that you become a case manager or a manager or whatever your position within this type of organization is because you want to help people, right? You don't want the work just to end on Sunday. You want to carry that work forward into the week and make sure every single day you're touching someone's lives in a meaningful way. So these types of sustainable career plans, that's your best tool, right? That's the best strategy you can have because by fostering that resilience and encouraging that adaptability to the ever-changing job market, right, you're going to equip your participants with the tools they need to thrive. So ultimately, what I'm saying is don't forget the core, right? The core of WIOA is to take the hardest to serve population and attempt to make a meaningful intervention, right? To come into their lives, to offer the services, to offer the supportive services, to offer the training services so that they can get a leg up and then take care of their own families, right? Because everybody should have a right to that. Lastly, but possibly the most important as far as performance is concerned, is exit strategy, okay? The vast majority of cases fail performance due to the case managers exiting the client too early. So here's something a lot of people are not aware of. WIOA does not have an exit timeline. You are both allowed and encouraged to wait until that client is credentialed and employable before exiting the client. So if you're asking yourself, oh, should I go and put this person exit? The first thing you should say is, do they have a job? If they don't have a job, I've not done my job, right? Because there's an entered employment screen that will show you in the system. As soon as you try to exit them, the system starts asking, are they working? It's trying to guide you towards a proper exit strategy. But at the end of the day, right, it's a mental game. You need to play chess where others are playing checkers. Because if they don't have the credential, if they don't have the job, what are the odds of them just going out and doing that on their own, right? And being successful within 6 months. So again, there's no timeline, there's no requirement. Okay, you're not getting any kind of benefit. There's no reward. There's no metric I've ever seen, and I've seen quite a few of them that says, have they exited the clients on time? There's nothing like that. Nope, looks like we have our first question. Yes, Jennifer?
Sorry, it's actually Susan. Will you please repeat
Susan.
that for my staff? Because this is not what we have been instructed to do up until this point. We have been instructed when they finish training, you exit them. And that's something that the WIOA people have struggled with. So please repeat that for my team.
Okay, so yes, so this actual aspect of the slide comes from training I did in DC from USDOLETA. So I can say with some confidence, and I'm a rather confident individual if you can't tell by my vest, you do not have to exit individuals on a timeline. There is no benefit to doing so. The only consideration that should come into your head when you're asking yourself, is this client ready to exit, is have they completed the credential if they're in a training? Have they taken the last test if they're in a training? Or at the very least, are they working? If they're not working, we need to provide career guidance. We need to provide job search, right? We need to help them with their resume. There's still work to do beyond the fact of their training being over, right? And I'll go to bat with anybody who disagrees with me on that. I've got plenty of policy. That's what I do. Okay. So again, you are allowed and encouraged to wait until you have found employment or additional post-secondary training placement before exiting your client. It just makes sense. Why would you exit someone who's not working? That's just a timer where in 6 months, they better be working or you're going to get punished, right? Your area is going to suffer in performance, right? Those are the reportable metrics, not exits. All right. Case notes. Do more with less. I've gotten a lot. I've phrased this slide a few different ways. I have modified it to say do more with less. A lot of people are emailing me and saying to their supervisors, well, that Kevin Mahadran fella said I didn't have to do case notes. I am not telling you that you do not have to do case notes. That's not what do more with less means, right? I'm telling you that the case notes that you do need to be concise. They need to be clear, right? I don't need a long essay. I don't need, save that for your novel, right? I just need to know what the information is that's changed, right? And we're going to go into that in a lot of detail, but that's like the theme of this section. Okay, here's a list of WIOA elements that require a case note. You're not going to memorize this. This is kind of where it comes to the point of just be thorough with your case management. Whenever you have a client come in, talk to the client on the phone, receive an email from a client, whatever we call communication events, go ahead and create a case note and describe what you've done. Describe what the conversation was, right? That'll keep you safe because this is a lot of items to just try and memorize or even to use as a desk reference. But I did want you to see it just once and have this resource available to you. This whole presentation is on staff online resources within the system, so you can pull it up anytime you want. There are a lot of good desk aids on this slideshow, but I'll point out the ones I think are actually worth your time. This one is just kind of an FYI, right? That way we can say we showed it to you at least once. Most of it is eligibility status, some eligibility status. A lot of it has to do with the services that you're entering, right? Take a gander at it, look at it at your leisure after the training's over. But these in essence are simply the items that the federal government is auditing when it's looking for case notes, right? Okay, so what are the characteristics of a case note? I'll just go ahead and say, I'm sorry. I know we've all seen these slides before. I have seen them many, many times, but I am federally required to let you know what the characteristics of a good case note are. So we're going to try to blaze through this one. Case notes need to be clear. They should be concise and easily understood by the reader. They should, I put concise in twice, but yeah, they should be clear and they should also be concise, right? They should be as brief as possible while covering the required information. I like bullet points. I've been told I cannot enforce the use of bullet points, but unless you have something against bullet points, I don't really understand why you would write paragraph form when you're trying to get in and get out. A lot of this section is about trying to save you time, right? Because I know that you have a lot of clients. I know that you have a lot of things that you have to do through your day. Many of you are probably working multiple programs. So don't waste your time with the case notes, right? Get in the information and get out of there. That's all you have to do. They need to be factual, right? Just the facts. Uh, you know, all of the information within the system should either be a fact or a determination, right? So a fact is, he is low income. She is disabled. A determination is she is suitable for this training, right? This client has discontinued contact with us, so I am closing their case. So you're either looking at a hard, cold fact, or you're looking at something like an objective conclusion, right? I know that he's disabled. I know that he can't stand on his feet for 8 hours a day. I know that he has like arthritis in his hands. This man is not suitable for welding training, right? Or in my case, Kevin's a narcoleptic. He's not suitable for truck driving. No one wants to be on the road with that. Okay, so that's the idea, right? So everything in the system should be either a fact or a determination. Relevancy. Again, everything in the system, and I think I say this 2 or 3 times because this is the thing we notice most when we're doing audits, is there will be information in the case note that is not at all relevant to WIOA. Every case note needs to describe an event directly related to a WIOA service. Okay. All that other information, if you need a rapport with your client, if you're friends with your client, if you're asking how's mama and them, that type of thing, that's great. We want you to have a good relationship with your client, but it does not need to make it into the system unless it has something to do with the program you're operating, right? That's just a privacy concern. It also is a waste of time. So just be careful with that. Make sure everything's relevant. Timely. Get your case notes written. I certainly understand if it takes 2 or 3 days to get a case note written. You've got 100 clients that day. You've got a job fair you got to go to, like all that stuff. I understand that you're busy. So there's no demand that you have them entered immediately, but don't let them sit, right? That's just not a good strategy for writing case notes, right? Get them written as soon as possible. Identifiable. This is more of a note. Whenever you list the name of an individual or you're talking about an individual that is not the participant in the case, maybe give us the full name at least one time. We see this a lot, whether you're discussing a different individual, a training provider, an employer, a coworker, right? Anything like that. We need kind of an audit trail. Give us a breadcrumb trail so we know who you're talking about. So it's a pretty simple idea, but just be careful with that. Okay, here's some general rules for writing case notes. This section was developed after we performed a few audits and some data validations like a few years ago. So some of it might be a little bit tired. You've probably heard it, hopefully you've heard it before. But here's some general information about case notes, right? Do not use a case note to vent or complain. There's a reason this one's number one. First of all, it's unprofessional, and we're all supposed to be workforce professionals. But beyond that, I'm going to give you a bit more of a carrot and stick on why not to do this. Venting and complaining in a case note is a red flag for auditors. It will always lead to a more thorough review of your interactions for 2 reasons. One, because if I'm seeing that you're venting and complaining, I'm concerned that this is going to be in every case note you have, that there's going to be a pattern of unprofessionalness, or I don't know what that word is. I'm a math person. Or even worse, that you're going to be disparaging the client or showing some kind of discrimination towards the client. But here's the second thing. Sometimes it's just funny, right? I was a case manager at DHR, child support enforcement, for 4 years. I know what you're going through. I know how humorous it can be when someone just starts railing off and he said, she said, and that type of stuff. They get angry, right? It's kind of funny to watch that. Like, it's like kind of a train wreck, but there are some times that you can kind of be like, oh man, I get that, right? But here's the thing. If the auditor is being entertained by auditing your records, you're encouraging them to audit every record you have. This is comedy gold. I'm still going to write you up, but I'm getting paid to watch this train wreck happen, right? So don't do it. Don't do any venting and complaining within the system, right? I always say, call your coworker, right? Talk to your neighbor in the cubicle next to you. Speak to your manager about it. Call me about it. Call your pastor about it, right? There are several other avenues for venting those feelings that are better than the public record that is the case notes that you're creating. So don't do it. I say bullet points over paragraphs. Technically not a rule. I'm just saying they're preferred over paragraphs. So don't come at me. Okay. That do not use non-WIOA abbreviations or shorthand without citing what that information is at least once. We've all heard that before. And of course, the tire, do not use slang, cliches, or jargon. We all know that, shouldn't be doing it, but just in case, it's a reminder. Participant status and follow-up contact case should now be entered quarterly instead of monthly. So be careful and listen to what I'm saying and read what is written on the screen, because I get a lot of flack for this one. Status and follow-up case notes. I'm not saying you only have to enter one case note a quarter. If the content of that case note is nothing more than Jim's still at work, he's doing good, he's happy, that's a status, right? That's good information, but nothing changed. You didn't provide any services, no services ended, right? There is no event that was relevant to WIOA that occurred. It's fine that that happens, but oh, yeah, that's a fantastic point. I was supposed to leave this with a disclaimer. This is the WDD WIOA case management training, okay? SWAPTE is not technically part of the other like 6 areas, governors, workforce, local area type thing. So I'm going to give you the rules I give to them because it's not my place to write y'all's rules. If you have another rule, feel free to make use of that rule. I'm not your boss. Okay, do what your boss tells you to do. Oh, Susan's coming out to slap my hand. I'm sorry, Susan. Can you forgive me?
No, I'm not slapping your hand. Outside of Mobile, the requirement is a monthly case note. If they are in follow-up, you will continue to contact them twice a month until they respond to you. If they do not respond during follow-up, you will have 6 attempts at contacting them. That can't be all the same thing. It can be written. It can be leaving them a voicemail. It can be sending them a letter. Anyway, that's it. Follow-up is important.
Okay, so yeah, I'm just gonna skip past this point because I totally forgot who my audience is. It's harder when y'all aren't like physically in front of me and I can just see Susan's like, eyebrow raising or like Laura shaking her head or something. So forgive me. And y'all, if especially Todd, everybody, if I say something that's like totally contradicts SWAPTE policy, y'all please do chime in. I don't want to confuse everybody. And I apologize about that. Let's move forward. Here's relevancy again. Relevancy is important. Do not comment on details that are not relevant to an individual's participation in WIO services. Auditors, we don't view that extraneous or personal information as a positive, right? In fact, describing those types of events in the system could be viewed as an improper use of a government record, or at worst, an invasion of privacy, right? And we want to respect our clients. We want to show them the same kind of dignity that we would like to be shown, right? When you talk to some government for whatever reason, you're not wanting them to put all of your personal information in a system unless it's necessary, right? So just be mindful of that. Relevancy is important. Okay, even more important rules. Always list the date in some kind of standard date format. At the very least, if you're describing an event that happens on the day of, write on this date or this day, right? This is a common issue when we're auditing records. And I'm just going to tell you, as an auditor, when I'm looking back at a record, let's say from last October, and someone says, last Thursday, the client came in, I'm already upset. Okay, because now I have to pull up my Outlook calendar, right? I have to hit the back month button like 6 or 7 times. I got to find the day, find when the last Thursday was, right? Don't do it. In general, you do not want to upset the auditors. Leave a breadcrumb trail. If here's the thought, the strategy behind that, right? Jokes aside, if you leave a breadcrumb trail to the types of information an auditor is looking for, they will spend less time on your caseload. Okay? Let them worry about your neighbor's caseload. Who knows what she's doing, right? But you want them to come in. They have to audit your record. You want them to come in, find what they're looking for, and get out of there, right? You don't want them looking around for things. And if we're going through a case note, we can't discover what we're looking for. We're going to have to keep looking at more and more case notes. That's just increasing the odds of something wrong being discovered, okay? So always list the date. This is a similar point. Another thing that will absolutely turn Kevin as red as his best is if you do not create a case note titled case note. Do not write a subject titled subject. Do not create a subject that says contact. Those are opportunities for you to show the auditors what they're looking for. This is what we were just discussing, right? So one, it's going to upset the auditor because now I have to look at every single case note because they all say case note, right? But two, like what am I going to find while I'm reviewing every single case note you have because you couldn't write eligibility intake on the subject line. Okay, so be mindful of that. We flag these every chance we get because believe it or not, we have the US DOL auditor coming next month. They're coming April 7th, and they are reviewing WIOA. Okay, so I want y'all to feel the ever-present threat. When I say the auditors, I'm not talking about me, Seth St. Christian. We're nice. I'm talking about the federal auditors, who it's our job, me, Seth Lane Kristen's job, to protect you from. But if you guys do make mistakes like this, right, it's very hard to defend. So again, long story short, subjects and topics, those lines on the case notes that you have to enter, those matter, those mean something, be specific. Do not create an all is well or training continues case note. You know, the assumption is if a case system or if a case service is open, the assumption is that all is well and that service is continuing, right? What we really need is the opposite, right? The negative space. We need to know if things are not well. We need to know if the training is discontinued and why, right? That's the important stuff. And it's not like you're going to get written up. This isn't like a big compliance issue. It's about saving you time. There's no value to writing an all is well case note. Maybe in follow-up, but not while the participant is actively receiving services, right? It's just a waste of time. Okay. Provider and partner interactions follow the same rules, include the full name, include dates. Case notes, here's some strategy, here's some theory, rather, case management theory. Case notes are used in concert with documents. So what I mean by that is, you know, when we're doing an audit or when the feds are doing an audit, we'll have all of your case notes on one screen and all of your documents on another screen. So we're about to get into privacy and confidentiality, but let's just say here that there's a lot of good reasons why some information goes in a case note and some information stays in the documents, right? So just be clear about that when you're doing that. Just understand that a lot of these rules are because we're going to go to the document first. If there's a document, that's what we're going to audit first. If there's not a document or the document is incomplete or for whatever reason, we may also view the case notes. But just be careful with that, especially when you're doing like personally identifiable information, FERPA information, anything like that. We prefer that info to be in a document, right? Because there's like system privileges and access and all that stuff. They keep your documents protected, whereas your case notes are a little more like wide facing, right? Far more people can view your case notes than can look into your documents. We'll get into that here in a second. And privacy and confidentiality. Yes, Todd. Yes, Laura. Is it best to put the case notes under that tab or write them in the selection for services? Okay. I don't care. This is a very good question. For those, it's in the chat. Laura's asking, is it best to put the case notes under the tab for case notes or to write them in the section for services? I say I don't care. I prefer writing it in the section for the service. But I cannot tell you that that's the rule because I've had my hand slapped. Either or is okay. You do what you feel the Holy Spirit's compelling you to do. Let's just put it that way, right? I will defend you to the grave if you like to put it in the case note or the service section. But you know, if you prefer just to put it in the main tab of case notes, that's fine too, right? Just be clear about the title. But there's no official rule. I've been working on making it an official rule, but we won't probably aren't changing anything anytime soon. Okay, privacy and confidentiality. This is a big slide. It's an important slide. We've all seen this slide. I stole this slide directly from the federal government. So just so you know. We all know that there are various safeguards in our system to protect personally identifiable information, FERPA information, HIPAA information, tax information, all of that stuff. So it's just important that you guys see at least once a description of the types of things that are considered highly sensitive, right? To help like prevent you from accidentally disclosing some of this stuff in a case note. I'm not going to go over this whole list. There are a couple that I will point out because they trip people up a lot. The biggest ones are the living arrangements and the relationship status. I always say there are no boyfriends or girlfriends in a WIOA case note. Okay, That's a relationship status that's actually been classified as highly sensitive. There can be spouses. You can say so-and-so's husband or so-and-so's wife, because that's a legal and public arrangement, right? That's a contracted arrangement with a judge involved and all that stuff. But no one has girlfriends, partners, side things, nothing like that, right? Don't put that information in a case note. Say, instead of saying his girlfriend is coming to pick him up or give him a ride to work, say his friend, right? Just make it bland, that type of thing. And then the other stuff you guys should know, right? I mean, this is basic stuff. I just wanted to make sure you saw it once. Okay, let's see here. In addition to case notes that describe your services, your day-to-day, right? Here's a list of the types of case notes that must be present in every case, right? So this is the first of many desk aids that might be useful for this, especially if you're like, did I do all the case notes I'm supposed to do for this? Am I missing something? Off the top, obviously, intake and eligibility. We need a case note that in general describes the intake process, describes the eligibility process. Kind of hand in hand is suitability. Now, some career centers, they got a little more time. Maybe they do intake and suitability together, and that's fine. Create one case note and make the subject of it intake and suitability, right? But if they happen on different dates, create two different case notes to describe those events, right? Training begin date and training end date. If a client goes through a training, is a ITA, OJT, IWT, whatever other acronym I can think of, right? Apprenticeship. Make sure you have a case note when that training begins and a case note when that training ends, right? And put in as much information in there as you can as far as the costs, the provider or the school, any success or outcomes that might have come from the training, that type of thing. Service closure and exit. You don't just put in a closure, right? You have to create a case note. Justify why you think it's time for this case to close. The client is working. The client has finished all of her exams. We're just waiting on the nursing certificate or whatever to come in, and she has a job lined up. All that good stuff. Create a case note, and then you're good to go. And then finally, follow up. When you do your monthly follow up, twice a month, as Susan said, right? Make sure you create a case note for each of those events, describing how that contact went, all the information, all that good stuff. Y'all know about that. Okay. The initial case note requirements. So the initial case note, that eligibility case note, it should have some topics covered, right? A description of why we're enrolling them in Title I services, first of all. Beyond the eligibility, we need to know the why. Do they want these services? Did they hear about these services? Is there a specific service or activity that we think is good for this client? Do they need financial literacy training? Do they need career guidance? Do they need mentorship, whatever, right? Describe as much as you can, whatever you know in that initial case note. For adults and dislocated workers, we need a description of that initial assessment and the individualized employment plan, the IEP. For youth participants, we also need the objective assessment, right? So a description of those, not going into the PII, but just describing in general what types of things that you assess, any barriers that the client might have, any proficiencies that the client might have, right? Or interests that the client might have, Okay. Describe any scores or determinations, like suitability, TABE testing, anything like that, my next move, all that good stuff. For training with higher suitability requirements, be sure to list the relevant details in minimal detail. So like I said earlier, think of it like this. Anyone coming behind you will have the documents on one screen and the case note on the other. If the client is disabled, we're going to have some kind of document describing that disability. If the client is basic skills deficient or low income, we're going to have some kind of document describing those states, right? For that reason, you don't have to describe that information in excruciating detail in the case note. Respect the client's privacy, right? You've uploaded the pay stubs, you've uploaded the tax form, you've uploaded the TABE, right? You know that information is housed somewhere where the right people can access it, right? Let's see here. For barriers, here's kind of an add-on to that. I prefer that you describe barriers in terms like this. The client is disabled. The client is economically disadvantaged. The client is skills deficient. Something like that, right? Something general, something that lets me know what the situation is, why this client is eligible, but that doesn't go into detail. Don't put he's dumb as rocks, in other words, right? Don't put he's poor as sin or anything like that. The proof and detail has to be in the documentation at the end of the day. Okay. This is a sample case note. I am pressed for time a little bit, so I'm not going to really read this to you, but just in case you're like, what's an example of a good case note? Jess here, our youth coordinator, she wrote this, which is why it's a good case note. My case notes are actually not this good. She's very good at case notes. So anyway, feel free to read that at a later date if you'd like. Okay, templates. I love templates. I love saving time. I've got a lot to do, especially since I've been promoted. I'm sure you have a lot to do, like, because I know what it's like on the floor of that. So we have templates within the system. So if you find yourself writing the same case note multiple times or across multiple clients, you're always like, oh man, I'm just got the same case note. I keep writing the same case note. The system can allow you to develop your own template. And then with the click of 3 or 4 buttons, it will create the entire case note and post it, right? Can be a very valuable time-saving thing. Here are some examples of some really well-written sample case note topics I've seen in the system. And I'm just like, I'm going to take her sample template and I'm going to put it on this list. So if you're doing occupational skills training, if you're doing an OJT, if your career center has like some type of recurring event, like a workshop or some kind of group activity, right? Incentive and supportive services. If you are giving somebody transportation assistance, food assistance, clothing assistance, whatever, right? That's probably going to look about the same each time. Make it a template, right? Save yourself some time. So anyway, I think this is neat. I'm a tech person, so I think that this is a great way to save time. If you have any questions about templates, or if you would like state reporting to assist you in creating your own template, send us an email. Send me an email specifically, and we'll do that. I think it's fun because I'm weirdo. Okay. Moving on from case notes into documents. I don't have a lot on documents. It's kind of the same thing, audit findings that we put into a training. The core thing about documents is something I heard when I first started here 11 years ago, which is if it is not uploaded into Alabama Works, it does not exist. This is the silver rule, right? This is my favorite rule of all the rules, and I like rules. I'm a rule follower and a rule creator, but this is my favorite rule. If you don't put it in the system, it doesn't exist. So in 2020, the state passed the Paperwork Reduction Act. So by law, people like me, auditors and monitors, we're not even allowed to look at your paper files anymore. It's fine that you have them. We're not saying don't have them, but when we do audits, we have to look at the electronic file. Because at the end of the day, as we'll discuss in performance, things put into the system are what makes it to the federal government, right? That's what they see. They can't see things that are just lying in a case file in a filing cabinet, right? So if it's not uploaded in the system, it does not exist, and it cannot be used as an excuse if there's some kind of finding. Okay. As you go through the system, most of you know this, all of you probably know this, you may see a section that looks like this. So any item in the system that requires a document to verify it is going to have this screen. It's going to say verify with a red asterisk, and it's going to give you a few options: verify, scan, and upload, right? So this is the system trying to notify you, hey, do you have a document for this? This has to have a document or you cannot put it in the system this way. So just be mindful of that, be on the lookout for it. Let us know if you have any issues with anything like that. But I just wanted everybody, especially for newer or like brand new case managers, to see at least one time. It's like you don't have to memorize the doc log. The system is trying to hold your hand and guide you through what needs verification. Okay, this is a list of items that can be verified using either case notes or self-attestation as appropriate. Okay, it's a lot of stuff. Most of this stuff I would expect you to verify with a case note because it's simple, right? The NAICS code, the ONET code, right? The training completion date. You don't have to upload a document for that or have them self-attest to it. Just create a case note. But let's go into the self-attestation items a little bit more, right? So these are the items that can be verified with self-attestation. And you see the can is bold, larger font, and underlined. That means Kevin's got some kind of sucker punch coming at you. But here's the list of items, right? Date of birth, disability status, veteran status, long-term employment, low income status, all this stuff. You can use a self-attestation form to verify things. But here's the trick. Should you? We have been cited for excessive use of self-attestation by the federal government in the past. I went to DC 3 years ago, me and Cecily, and about had a conniption fit when I asked DOL ETA in front of every other state, hundreds of people, right? What percentage of items in the system do you expect to be self-attested versus having a document? That man looked at me and on God said, somewhere between 10% and 90%. It's not very helpful. There's no way for me to tell you, is this too many or too few self-attestations if you're going to give me a range of 10% to 90% of every item, right? So when we came back, we developed this policy, which is to say, make an effort. Every time, make an effort to get the document. That's the first step. If they don't have their birth certificate, or they don't have their driver's license, or they don't have their veteran paperwork, right, their DD 214, you know, make an effort to get it, have them self-attest to that information. And then the first thing you do once they're eligible is to assist the client in getting that document. Everybody needs a birth certificate. Everybody needs a driver's license. Everyone needs a social security card. Veterans need the DD 214. You won't be the first or last person to ask them for that document, right? It is a career service to assist the client in obtaining that critical information, right? And then once you get it, once you help them get it, you put a copy in the system, you give the other copy, the hard copy to them, right? And you have improved that person's life, I guarantee it. Also, maybe advise them to get a safe or a locked filing cabinet or something that they can keep those documents in. Anyway, so that's the rule kind of in theory behind self-attestation. Just be careful. It is okay to use it, but you should use it under advisement. Okay, this is the red slide. I don't like this slide. These are items that always require a document every single time. And the first one is the worst one, right? So about 3 years ago now, boy, time has flown. The ETA, DOL, US DOL, that is, in their infinite wisdom, decided to start requiring actual documentation from DHR, DHS agencies for public assistance. And that does include TANF and SNAP. Everybody should know that this is not new information. This has been going around for a few years now. But I just want to say it again, it's one of the required things. We do have a document on Staff Online Resources called the Partner Agency Certification Form. I think it has partner agency in there. But essentially, it is a form that you can send to DHR or any partner, any state agency, and have them fill it out and send it back to you. And we're counting that as documentation, right? I would highly recommend that you build a rapport with the DHR caseworkers that your clients have. That will serve you for certain. Because, like I said, I started at DHR for 4 years. I know how it can be trying to work with those case managers. Okay. But there's not much we can do. The feds have made it a requirement, so we're beholden to it, right? Just do the best you can, and try to build those relationships where you can, right? But I also say, think outside of the box. Like for SNAP clients, I say all the feds said was we have to have documents. They didn't say what documents we had to have. So if you know a client is on SNAP, if they know they have a current balance on their SNAP card or EBT card, right? Tell them to go to the Piggly Wiggly, buy something, come back with the receipt and the SNAP card, scan those into the system, right? The receipt is going to have at least some portion of that card number on there. Then you have the actual card to match to it. That we're calling that verified. So like I said, it's not just something specifically from DHR. It's any document that 100% proves that that person has those benefits available currently, right? So think outside the box. Okay, let's move on. Basic skills deficiency. We require the TABE. Please only upload the TABE results. I do not need 55 pages. The taxpayers of this state pay for our data. So just upload the 1 page of results, right? That's key. Provider name, that's everywhere. Don't worry about that. Credential information in the state of Alabama, we do require a copy of the credential if you say someone earned a credential, right? You have to have a copy of the credential. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Employment information, you can use pay stubs. There's another form that the feds allowed, so I've created it, and it's also in Staff Online Resources. It's called the Participant Employer Follow-Up Survey. It's one of the legal forms we're allowed to use to document employment. It may be easier than trying to get pay stubs, bank statements, and all that stuff, mainly because either the participant or the employer can fill it out, right? So that's very valuable. You can have the participant fill it out with all their wage, start date, how many hours they work, all that good stuff. It's all on the form. Or if you can't get a hold of the participant and the employer is willing to fill it out, they can also fill it out. and then you can upload that into the system and that verifies the employer. That can make it a little bit easier. MSG dates, make sure the date is on the MSG. Some like transcripts and report cards these days only have the month and year. I'm not sure what that's about. We do need to know the date that report card was issued or the transcript was issued, right? So if you notice that, but you do know what the date is, create a case note, say how you learned about that date. Be like, okay, Johnny's report card only had the month and year. I spoke with his school counselor. She advised me that it was released on the 3rd, right? Then you can write on the MSG, write May 3rd, 2024. Make sure you created a case note. Don't just go writing willy-nilly on documents, and then initial what you corrected. But we do need to have the MSG date on the actual MSG document. So just do your best with that. Data program entry, obviously that's going to be your application. Oh, I thought there was another bit to that. Data program entry should be on your application. Make sure the client is filling out the application in its entirety and assigning it and dating it, and that'll be good to go on that. Okay, uploading documents. Data validation law, this is what we were talking about earlier with the blue verify hyperlink. Several items have to be validated. The data you enter, rather, has to be validated. And that's one of my core responsibilities, me and my team. So like I said, make sure that you have the document. Don't just put other and then leave it blank, right? Where we do have to check that. And data validation is actually starting like next week. Heads up, Susan and Laura. So, just be aware that process, we do data validation twice a year. We do it in the spring and then we do it again in the fall. So that is, I've already got all the workbooks printed and everything. So they will be starting on that on Monday. So just heads up, y'all check your data. Okay, all eligibility documents should go together in one file. It makes it easier for the monitors to ensure everything's present. So that you can, basically what I'm saying there is you can upload the application, the driver's license, birth certificate, grievance and complaint form, disclosure form, all that stuff. You can upload that as one big file. That makes it a little easier for everybody. Other assessments, so if you're talking about My Next Move or some kind of interest in aptitude testing, we prefer those to be uploaded separately from the eligibility documents because we're not looking for those at the same kind of point. And we don't want to lose those assessments when we're going through eligibility stuff because we're just not going to expect it to be there, right? That's something other than eligibility. Try not to upload blank pages. I know it happens, right? Life happens. But that is a big thing because you can fail a data validation or an audit because a scanner setting is wrong or a scanner is broken or something like that. So just be careful. Make certain that the dates match. That's very important. If a non-intake document has a blank or incorrect date, this is what I was talking about with the MSG a minute ago, then you should include a case note details. I'm just repeating myself at this point. So just be sure everything has a date. When we're doing data validation, the number one thing we're looking for is dates. It's not that the document's there. It's that the date on the document matches the date in the system. That's generally what we're validating. Okay, more documents uploading. Make sure you're uploading the correct document to the correct person. This is one of those understandable mistakes that is also unforgivable. Okay, we talked about FERPA, we talked about HIPAA, we talked about tax information and PII. When you upload the document to the wrong person, you're exposing that PII to a whole different set of case managers, right? In general, you guys can only see the documents and case notes within your area, maybe within your office, depending on how your manager set it up. So do not upload the document to the wrong person. That's a big mistake. So you got to be careful with that, especially if you have access to several areas or several career centers. Just be mindful that you're looking at the right person. This has happened before, and a youth provider actually got cut because of this event. So as understandable as the mistake is, the board was not very forgiving of it. So I'm just making sure everyone knows, be precise. The number one duty of a case manager is to have heart. The second duty of a case manager is to be accurate, right? As long as you are doing this for the right reason and you're doing it as accurately as possible, you're going to be good. Okay. Make sure your scanned document is legible. A rule of thumb is to never copy a copied copy. I just like the way that sounds. I've heard that like in the 90s and barely understood what it meant, but it's a good rule, right? Don't, make sure you're trying to use the original. You lose integrity when you make multiple copies. Like I said earlier, only upload the page with the scores for the tape. Do not use outdated documents, okay? Every time you need to print out a document, I need you to go to staff online resources and pull the current version of the document. We have to edit these things a lot because the federal government is kind of capricious about its rules and it changes them all the time. So the documents are changing all the time. So don't print out 50 copies of something and say, I'm set for 5 years. No, please print out a fresh copy every time. The fields on the intake document, whatever intake document you use, I prefer to use the WIOA application in the system because it's gonna kind of make sure you go through all these questions. But if you're still using a CIF or whatever, that's fine. The trick is there should not be blank fields. Okay, if something doesn't apply to the participant, you need to write NA does not apply, et cetera, et cetera. Don't just leave it blank because that just makes it look like it wasn't done. It causes doubt when it's being audited. So please do not do it. Okay, before I move on to performance, does anyone have any questions on case notes and documents? Susan, Laura, would y'all like to take a quick break before we roll into performance? Performance is a pretty long section, and apparently only I find it fun. Did I lose you? Has everyone already fallen asleep?
Yeah, there you go. Hey, we haven't fallen asleep. We're just raring to go. But we'll do with whatever Laura wants us to do.
All right, Laura, it's on to you. I see her typing. 5-minute bathroom break. Okay, let's do a 10-minute break. We'll get through it. But let's come back at about 11:13 or so. And then we can get started up again.
Wonderful. And Kevin, you did a wonderful job on those sections. Thank you.
Hopefully didn't say anything else that does not apply to SWAPTE. You guys just keep me on my toes about that because I will forget. I can see Laura typing, so I'm just trying to see what's going on before I get started.
Hey, Kevin, while we're waiting on everyone else, can you kind of walk through for me what happens when somebody, say they finish training and they're not working yet? So as a case manager, I'm going to work with them to find a job, maybe work on interview skills, that kind of stuff. Provide them a value-added service every month until they go to work. I can document that in a service, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
everything's
Open. But then do I go ahead and close the 300 service, but leave the 205 open? And what will keep the 205 from system closing will be the service I put in every month that is value add.
right. Now,
Okay.
specifically, the value added service, that's a youth characteristic. So, youth are required to have a value added service every 30 days. But I mean, it's still a good practice. I mean, I'm not telling you not to serve your clients, you should still be serving them. But yeah, the IEP, that end date can be extended out. If the client has completed their training but has not found a job, you can push that back a few months or whatever, right? Like that, it's manageable. But yeah, just create services for the employment seeking and job search and all resume building and all that good stuff. Yeah.
But they can be put under the Wagner-Pizer enrollment.
Uh,
Or do we have to have one under WIOA?
I'm assuming based on the 300 that they already had a WIOA. So those Wagner-Pizer services are available under the WIOA ribbon as well.
Okay.
So you can, like, I cannot officially advise you on Wagner-Pizer matters. At least,
I can advise them, so tell me and I'll tell them.
okay. Well, unofficially for me, you can have those services being present in both Wagner-Pizer and WIOA ribbons. So you could if they have a Wagner-Pizer open and you're doing like job search activities, right? You can enter that code under both. They're reported together in the Pearl. So that's fine, and it helps keep both cases open and active and everything like that. But even if they only have a WIOA enrollment open, the Wagner-Pizer suite of services is available under WIOA as well. So that's just kind of the rule. Well, not the rule. That's the best practice. Best practice. That's a nice innocent word that no one can get upset with me over. Laura, let me real quick. It is called the Participant Employment Follow-up Survey. Let me see if I can. Oh, it's in the system as Employment Follow-up Survey. I hope I don't break everything when I do this. I'm going to share my other screen here. Crap. No, oh well, I'll flip back. So under staff, this is staff online resources. This is a page everybody needs to be intimately familiar with because all of your Wagner-Pizer and WIOA things are on here. Now I was just remembering y'all have your own section. Did it not make it into your section? This might be a thing I need to fix. I might need to add this onto y'all's section because the partner agency certification form somehow made it on here twice. I am confused by that, but somehow my fancy employment document did not make it on here. For now, I'll get this fixed. Jess is out today, but I'll contact her. I'm going to make myself a note so I actually do that. SWAPTE needs employment survey. But for now, if you guys need to just go ahead and get this moving, under the standard Commerce WDD section, you will see employment follow-up survey right here under under eligibility. I used to have a case management section. She has removed my section and has collapsed it into eligibility. It's not technically part of eligibility. So I'm gonna poke fun at her for that. She has become the queen of the staff online resources castle, and that's fine. But technically not eligibility. But anyway, y'all can see the kind of relationship we have. All right, let's see here. Let me come back to my PowerPoint. No. Present in Teams. Present. Is it going to send me all the way back? Let me hide my fancy view. No, 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 no. Oh my God, this is annoying. Okay, I'm not sharing the screen again, Laura, so in case that comes up again, I will have to save it till the end of the presentation because this is killing me. No, no. It's also all being recorded, so this will be fun to come back through. Okay, here we go. Performance. Fancy performance slide. All right, yeah, we'll get at it. All right, performance. So let's start at the top. Suitability. So again, this whole training came about because of the training completion report that was sent out. There's only two reasons why training completion is outside the acceptable range, right? It's suitability and case or service closures, case what we call system closures. So we're going to discuss both. We're going to start with suitability. Suitability is a very important topic. The suitability, and again, this was tailored for youth. I'm also going to make a note to retailer this for adults as well. So just remove the word youth. The suitability process in the WIOA program involves evaluating whether a potential participant is both eligible and appropriate for a program based on the circumstances, barriers, and needs, right? This goes beyond basic eligibility. This is the extra step, right? This is when we're assessing the WIOA program, well, assessing whether the WIOA program is the best fit to help that individual achieve either the education or employment success that we're looking for, right? As a suitability process is a mandated element of WIOA, it is in the WIOA law, right? The state does not accept excuses for failing performance. That's a big point. This isn't the kind of thing where you can later say, well, you know, we thought he would go to work. We thought that she would complete the training, blah, 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 blah. No, that doesn't work, right? It's a mandate. It is literally written in the law that we enforce. So we can't accept excuses for failing performance, right? That should have been prevented at the beginning, or at least enough cases of it should have been prevented, because your performance rates are never going to be 100%. I'm never going to tell you everyone has to get a job, everyone has to complete their training, right? That's not how it works. There's always going to be a margin of acceptable failure, right? Because things happen. People pass away, they get pregnant, they have children, children get sick, right? All these things, they happen. But those situations are accounted for in the allowable failure, right? That's why we don't say you have to have 100% credentials or 100% MSGs, right? So there's no excuse. So do the suitability, right? If you have a question about it, if you think a client is borderline, I'm not sure, you know, it seems like he's motivated. It seems like she has the skills to do this ITA or to take this OJT on, but you're not sure. Discuss the situation with your career center manager, right? Give Susan a call. She loves getting phone calls, right? She's got nothing better. No, I'm just messing. So Susan's very busy, but I bet you she would take the time, despite how busy her schedule is, to help you make that determination, right? Because it's important, right? That's the client's life at stake, first of all, and it's your own area's performance at stake. Or, you know, if you feel brave, give me a call or send me an email. I'll help walk you through what I believe the suitability for the client might look like. So just make sure you're getting it done. So we have a few areas where suitability is exactly what WIOA is trying to help you with. The reason we do comprehensive assessments for the youth participants is because determining suitability for youth is hard, right? That's the calculus of WIOA, is you have a 17-year-old high school dropout, you know, she's low income, right? Maybe she's pregnant or parenting, right? There's all these, what we might call like red flags or yellow flags that might lead to her being unsuitable for this specific training, right? Or for this specific type of career. That's why we do the comprehensive assessment. And it's also why it needs to be recorded in the system, because you can't just say she's not suitable. There has to be evidence to back up that determination. And for youth, that's going to be the comprehensive assessment, right? Evaluate commitment and motivation, right? Especially for adults. And a youth can be forgiven for not being committed to working or motivated to go to training, right? They're children, right? At the end of the day. You need to determine the participants' willingness to engage in these program activities, right? You need to assess if they're ready to work, if they're in a place where they can handle working, right? If they're not, there's still services we could provide, probably under Wagner Pizer, right? We could say, well, let's do some soft skills training. Let's see if they can come to a few office settings. One thing I always say is, don't just enroll the client the first day they walk in and are eligible. I can't tell you not to, but it's not a best practice. You have them come in, do all of their paperwork, discuss the program with them, get an idea of what their goals are, right? And then say, okay, that's enough for today. I'm going to schedule you another meeting in a week. See if they come back. Right off the bat, that's going to tell you something about that client. Are they really motivated, or are they a snap ENT client that had to come in? That's the difference, right? You got to think again, chess, not checkers. That's the whole thing. That's why we're discussing strategy so much. Make sure you're giving them ample opportunity to prove to you that they're suitable, right? That makes your decision easier. Alignment with program services, right? So compare the participants' need. I got to fix this because it's bothering my OCD. Compare their needs with what your program can provide, right? If they don't have work experience, give them work experience. If they need occupational training but are otherwise ready to go, pursue that, right? If they can't pass the tape, they need remediation services and tutoring, right? They need some education services, right? So just align what they need with what you have right off the bat. Ensure the participants' goals align with the program resources, right? We all know WIOA's funding gets cut every year. And then some areas struggle even more with that based on how the allocations are derived. So that's like right off the bat, you don't need to be enrolling everybody who comes in the door because your funds are limited. Like some areas have ran out of funding because of how bad the cuts have been. And there's anticipated to be another 10 to 13% cut this next fiscal year. So again, make sure you're being mindful. Managers and area managers and supervisors, y'all need to be having a dialogue with your case managers. They need to know what the resource looks like, what the funding is looking like, right? That can help make those suitability decisions because we're getting to a point where we're losing so much funding that things are going to have to change, right? The easiest thing to change is to have an unsuitable client pursue other paths that aren't as demanding on your funding, right? And then once they've proven the suitability for an ITA or proven the suitability for an OJT, then we pursue that service, right? Again, it's just a strategy thing. Referral for unsuitable candidates. At the end of the day, you don't say, I'm sorry, Jimmy, you're eligible but not suitable. Have a good one. No, the state has tons of resources, right? Consider your partner programs, right? Adult education, TANF and SNAP, Voc Rehab for like disabled clients, right? Or even a community-based organization or a faith-based organization can be helpful for some people. But referrals is a process me and Tammy look at a lot. We're not really seeing those happening. If they are happening, they're not being entered as a service. Performing a referral is a service. There's a whole section of services in the 100, 200 series that cover referrals to various programs. So put that in. Put the service in. Say, I'm referring you to Voc Rehab. And I guarantee you there's a service that says referral to Voc Rehab, right? So just make sure you're being mindful of it. There's a reason all those services exist. But when I pull a service report, we're only using like 15 services out of 500. So let's be mindful of what all the things we can do are, right? Okay, here's some examples of unsuitable clients. So example one, this is what I call high self-sufficiency. So let's say we're looking at an 18-year-old child, right? They have a high school diploma, they have a steady part-time job, and they are already planning to enroll in college. They've done their FAFSA. Maybe they've gotten a portion of that funded through the FAFSA or a scholarship or a trust fund or a rich uncle or whatever, right? For some reason, they're already planning on going to college, independent, right? Here's the reason why this client may not be suitable. They do not face significant barriers, right? They don't require intensive services provided by WIOA. They may be better suited for Wagner-Pizer services or some kind of self-directed program. And you can help them with that. You can refer them out. You can show them Coursera or other free post-secondary learning platforms that are on the internet, right? If they just need help like studying for the ACT or SAT, you can help them find prep for that. All that stuff's great, but they don't need to be, put into WIOA necessarily when they have all of the sufficiency already. That client is better off than the vast majority of our clients in our target population. Okay, example two, lack of interest or commitment. Let's say we have a 20-year-old high school dropout. He's entirely eligible. Across the board, he's eligible. But he consistently misses your appointments. He's not showing any interest in training or employment, right? And he's refusing to participate in program activities. So that client, while eligible, lacks the motivation and participation, which would make it difficult to achieve WIOA program outcomes. That impacts the individual's performance in the career, and it impacts your performance as an area, right? So lack of interest or commitment is a big suitability topic, right? You got to be mindful of that. Needs beyond WIOA scope. So this one's kind of hard. Let's say you have a 17-year-old homeless youth with severe mental health issues, and a substance abuse problem. Here is why that student may not be suitable, right? While eligible, the immediate need exceeds the scope of what WIOA can provide. That's just a hard truth, right? They need to be referred to a specialized program. They need to be referred to a mental health services program, maybe a transitional housing program, maybe a substance abuse counselor, right? There are organizations and agencies that cover those things better than WIOA. So don't hold on to that client, refer them out, get them the help they need, right? And again, I'm not telling you to slam the door in their face. I'm telling you to work with them. That's the heart, right? We're not doing what we do because we make bukus of money doing it. That's not how state government works, right? We're doing what we do because we believe we're making a difference, as I said at the beginning. And you're going to make more of an impact on this student or this individual by referring them out to programs that can actually help them than you will by trying to force them into our programs, which they're not going to be prepared for. They have too much real life going on to think of the future, to think of training, right? Maybe even to think of a job. They need serious intervention by professionals. And while we're all professional workforce, developers, we're not qualified to discuss topics like severe mental health, suicide, substance abuse problems. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Okay. So here are the key points to address unsuitable candidates, right? Always explain why our program is not the best fit. Okay. Provide the referrals like we've discussed a few times. Ensure that this person feels supported and encouraged, even if they're not enrolled, right? This is the human part of it. Again, we're here because we have heart, not because it's fattening our wallets, right? So don't forget that. Please don't lose sight of that. I promise I'm not going to stay on the soapbox too long, but I truly have seen the difference these types of programs can have in someone's life. Without going into unnecessary detail, many years ago, I was one of these students that best fit example 3. It was a state agency program like ours that changed my life. Be that force. Be that force of good that intervenes in these people's lives. I assure you, one day I will never forget the name and face of the case manager that turned my life around. That kind of goodwill cannot be bought, right? And you're not going to get that in any other private scenario or private occupation, right? That what I'm saying is you're making a difference even if you don't always realize it. Someone out there, if you're doing right by these people, someone out there is thinking of you when they're praying at night, okay? Just be mindful of that. All right, let's move on before we get too emotional. System closure, not a fun topic. I'm trying to break it down here. It's not that it's complicated, it's that it requires intense case management to prevent. So let's dive into it. A prevalent threat to performance is the system closure process, right? The only way to prevent a system closure is proper case management. System closures can occur when a projected beginning date passes, when a projected end date passes, or when an actual end date passes. It's always based on the date of these services that you put them in when you create the service, right? So your alerts should be set up. Everyone, when you go into your dashboard, you go into your profile, you're going to see a section for your alerts. And it's customizable. You go in and set what alerts you want to get. Everyone should be getting those alerts that say a projected end date is passing, a projected beginning date is passing. Make sure those are turned on. Make sure you work your alerts, right? Those, if you're getting alerts that you don't need or don't use, turn them off because these alerts are critical because a system closure counts as an automatic failure towards performance. right off the bat. Essentially, it's the federal government saying they're not working on this case, failing. And that's it. And again, they don't accept excuses. So we're trying, this whole training came about because we are noticing system closures in SWAPTE. We're noticing training completion failure in SWAPTE. We want to help, right? We're the TA arm, we're the technical assistance arm. So make sure you're working your alerts, work those alerts, right? That's very important. And if I send a system closure report to your supervisor and that makes it your way, get that thing fixed, right? Because what I'm trying to say is on March 31st of this month, it's too late. Me and CNU have already prepped the Pearl. We've already sent it to USDOL and they're calculating our performance. We got to start getting ahead of the game here because our performance is lacking. And I don't know if y'all are aware, our funding is partially based on our performance. So you're hurting us every way we can, right? So just do your best. If you have any questions about a system closure, if you are not able to reopen a system closure because too much time has passed, send it to the help desk. Cecily and Kristen will open it for you. They will not complain, right? They'll be happy to do it. That's better than us getting a report that has 785 system closures on it, like the last time I pulled, right? All right, let's move on. Actual performance. All performance begins and ends with a document called the Pearl. The Pearl is a participant individual record layout. This is a large, fancy Excel spreadsheet. We call it a table because we use SQL to pull it, but it's essentially a fancy Excel spreadsheet. It has 509 columns for every participant in the system. 509 columns. The reason I'm telling you all this is because of the amount of data that's being submitted to the federal government. It's safe to assume that all of the good work you do throughout your day is being read by some computer at USDOL. Okay, 509 elements, that's a lot more elements than employment, MSG, and credential, right? Those are 3 of those 509 columns. It covers everything. Their eligibility, their demographic data, every service that they've received, the dates that they started and completed all this, the referrals to other programs, all of that stuff is sent in the Pearl, right? So be mindful, the work you're doing is being reviewed. I know sometimes it can feel like, why am I even doing this? Like this is a waste of time. I don't need to put in the service. I don't need to fill out this form. I assure you it is not a waste of time, okay? All right, let's move into the actual performance. Performance measurements are, there are 3 categories. There's primary, secondary, and federal. The primary performance measurements, those are the ones you see on all your reports: employment, credentials, measurable skills gains, and retention with the same employer. Secondary performance measurements are on the report, but they do not have goals on them because it's up to the state board to decide what's an official performance or primary performance indicator versus a secondary. So right now, those just include participants served, training related to employment, and youth placement and education. I'm going to go over all of these. They all have their own slide. I just wanted you to see all these once. Finally, federal performance measurements. Now, when the state is doing assessments of local areas, we do not consider median earnings. Statewide, we look at median earnings. There's a couple reasons, but the primary reason for that, the one I'll go into, is because on a local area or even career center level, you don't have much authority or power to change how much these employers are paying their people, right? That's not something that we can do, right? It would take bigger politicians and executives and all that good stuff to make those changes. So like I said, we really want to focus more on the primary performance measurements and the secondary performance measurements. We provide the median earnings. That's just for research and for like an FYI, just so you guys can tell where your area is at. But those are not reviewed on an area level. You'll never, in other words, you'll never get a sanction because of median earnings, at least not while I'm sitting in this office. All right. Employment. We're an employment agency. WIOA is an employment grant, right? This is the most important thing. We measure employment with a metric called employment rate in a quarter, ERQ. Any individual that is enrolled into WIOA and receives that 205 service or whatever, right, has to get a job. Every single one of them. This is a fancy way of saying everybody has to get a job because everyone is going to be in the denominator for your employment rate, right? So this is where suitability comes in. Don't enroll them if they can't get a job. That's going to be a failure, right? That's the whole thing. We got to fix it. We got to fix something before we enroll them. Okay, employment rates measured twice, second quarter after exit and fourth quarter after exit. The type of employment does not matter. In fact, the wage they're making does not matter. If they're making over 1 penny a quarter, they are going to count as employed. So worst case scenario, get them working somewhere, even if it's part-time, right? Continue to work with them and pursue better employment and offer Wagner Pfizer services, all that stuff, right? But, you know, at the end of the day, just having them working is better than them just sitting on the couch, right? The system calculates the ERQ using information entered or not entered, he said passive aggressively, in the follow-up ribbons. I went too far. I thought there's another bit. We do wage matching. Everyone's always saying, well, what about the wage matching? We don't have to do follow-up because the wage matching covers us. I assure you the wage matching is not covering us. Otherwise, no area would be failing employment. Okay? It doesn't cover you. That is the backup. The primary source of this information is supposed to be follow-up, not the wage matching. Don't even think about the wage matching. Do your job, right? Do your responsible duty to contact these clients twice a month for 12 months and to do the follow-up, get that employment information, get it verified, get it in the system, right? That'll protect you. And I just realized that Jess snuck a picture of me onto my slide. Again, this is the kind of relationship we have. I'm making a note to remove this image. Anyway, I don't even, this isn't even relevant to measurable skills games. I don't know why. This was when I was in SpongeBob last year. Anyway, let's just move on. Any individual that receives a training service, right? So that's OJTs, that's ITAs, right? And apprenticeships, if you're doing those. If they receive one of those services, they will be required to have an MSG, right? Because those services include an MSG as part of their design. There's some weird math that goes into how many MSGs someone needs. Instead of trying to teach you the weird math, which would ruin all of our mornings, I'm just going to say, document every MSG they get. If it's a student who's in school, put every report card in. If it's an OJT client, they should have 2 MSGs. 50% of the OJT hours completed on the training employment plan, and then 100% of the OJT completed, right? That's 2 MSGs. ITAs most likely have some kind of transcript, or at the very least, they have a test at the end, right? The skills progression test. So be mindful, enter every MSG you get. That way you don't have to learn the scary time math, right? Okay, this is one of the most important desk references that you can get. This is the list of services that force your clients to require an MSG for performance, right? I would highly recommend having this in whatever performance binder or whatever that you have, because this will let you know, do I need to get an MSG for this client? We've had people try to force in MSGs when the client never received any of these services. And that's just a waste of time. There shouldn't even be an MSG, right? But somehow it happens. It's kind of odd. Off the top, all in-school youth need an MSG, right? They're in school. They should be getting report cards. They have to have an MSG. If they're enrolled in one of these specialty programs, that's not as often, but if it happens, they will also need an MSG. Otherwise, all participants who receive one of these listed services will have to have an MSG. So like I said, this is a very valuable desk reference. If you're putting some code in, you say, I'm going to list that this person was enrolled in state and local training, or, you know, received an occupational skills training like an ITA or something like that. You better be prepared to get the MSG because it's going to be required. Okay. Types of MSGs. There are 5 types of MSGs: the educational functioning levels, secondary school diplomas, that's high school diplomas, right? As long as the student goes to work or goes to further post-secondary education. That's the only one that has like a weird criteria on it. The high school diploma doesn't count for anything unless that student goes to work or is placed in education. So be mindful of that. Secondary or post-secondary report cards and transcripts, right? Training milestones. So for on-the-job training, you're looking for a training milestone. There's a neato mnemonic device to help you remember. OJTs need training milestones. I put a whole list of what that means here. I'm not going to go into that. Essentially, like I said, it's the 50% of hours completed on the training employment plan, and then the 100% of hours completed on the training employment plan. Skills progressions. Occupational skills training, occupational skills progression, right? Just another trick to help you remember which one goes where. But this is a test. right? This is an exam. It could be the NCLEX, it could be the CDL driving exam. It could be like one of the many like NCCR, like industry exams and all that type of stuff. But essentially it's an exam. It could be MAPS if you're using MAPS for a participant. But it's a test. So make sure you upload that test, have the dates on there and all that good stuff, and then enter your MSG. Okay, credentials. Anyone that receives essentially an ITA, I included the entire list. We don't really have a lot of areas doing these other types of training, but if you do have a entrepreneurial training or do the like English as a second language stuff or anything like that, or apprenticeship, those would also require a credential. But in general, what we're talking about is the ITA process requires a credential, right? Just a note, on-the-job training and work-based learning does not report credentials for performance. Again, I'm not sure how people would be getting credentials if they're just enrolled in work-based learning and on-the-job training, but it's not going to count, so don't force it, right? They don't have to complete MAPS just because they got on-the-job training. Now, MAPS is a valuable program. If you think it would service the client to receive it, that's fine. Put it in, upload the credential, that's great. But it's not a requirement, right? We're all about tailoring the needs of the client, right? This is the official definition of a credential. I don't think this is a great definition because I feel like it's one of those times when you read a whole paragraph and you don't feel like you learned anything. I created my own definition of a credential, and you'll notice it's in bullet points. Laura, let's pay special close attention to the following list, please. So first off, it has to report the completion of a standalone course of study. It doesn't need to be buried in some several other requirements before you can get a job with this. And you need to be able to get a job with that credential, right, at the very least. It needs to include at least 40 hours of instruction, period. Not my rule, Tammy's rule, and I'm not going to fight Tammy on it. So 40 hours of instruction, that's a bare minimum. The average credential in the state of Alabama takes over 200 hours to achieve. So I feel like 40 hours is pretty lenient. But yes, that does mean that we cannot do forklift training unless you're talking about AWSP, in which case, see my disclaimer at the beginning of the slideshow. Moving on. Have a cost that's competitive with other programs, right? We review that. The monitors review that. If you sign someone up for a specific type of training, they're going to Google what that training costs at other providers in your area. And that can be a finding because, again, our money's getting tight. So we got to be cost effective, right? You wouldn't go to the grocery store and see two of the exact same brand of milk and pay $3 more for one. Think of it as the same, right? Pretend it's your money because you're a taxpayer, hopefully. So, technically it is your money, right? Okay. And then finally, it needs to fulfill the requirements for an entry or better level full-time position with multiple companies across the industry. In other words, it needs to have value. It needs to be the type of credential that has some value. Employers are looking for it. And before someone jumps on me about MAPS, we have actually had executives from our state board and from some of our affiliates and stakeholders that say they love MAPS. They're into MAPS. So I know MAPS is not a traditional occupational skills training, like you're not learning how to wield a weld, whatever the weld implement's called. I don't know things about welding. You're not learning how to, do phlebotomy or to puncture someone with a needle. But apparently businesses are into it. And until such a time as we are told businesses are not into it, we're going to count it as a credential, right? But beyond that, in general, you need to be able to get a full-time job of some value with the credential for it to count. Okay. Similar to the MSG slide, this is the credential slide. So these are the types of individuals who will require a credential if they have one of these services, right? So right off the bat, all in-school youth are going to require a credential, same as MSG. That credential is the diploma, right? But if they receive one of these other services, they will also require a credential. And most all of these are education services, right? Because that's the whole idea. A credential comes about after the completion of an education program. So, but this is, again, a good desk aid. This will keep you from wasting time trying to find credentials for students that aren't even in those services, that type of thing. Okay. Retention with the same employer. I'm not a big fan of this. I will be honest about it. It's problematic on a statistical level to measure it the way they measure it. But it's also just like, I'm not exactly certain it's in the best interest of the client, but we're going to go into it because they made it an official performance thing and we have to monitor it. So every individual that is found to be working in the second quarter is put into the denominator for retention. Essentially, the system's going to check if they're working at the same job in the fourth quarter as they're working in the second quarter. It's measured, like I said, at 2 quarters after exit and 4 quarters after exit. It checks to see if the FEIN is the same. That's the primary problem, right? Because if you know anything about FEINs, a company can have multiple FEINs. If they have several branches throughout the state, every branch is very likely going to have its FEIN. Regions Bank has like 15 FEINs. So do your best. I don't worry about this. I have put the performance goal on the performance reports. If you look at the report, you'll notice that. But if you also notice, I don't highlight it with my apparently problematic color scheme. I think it's a delightful color scheme, but I've got criticism on it. I'm also not changing it because I'm a manager now. Moving on. So like I said, the best you can do is to check the FEIN. If you see they're working at the same company, but the FEINs aren't the same, you could try to check that. All of it said, at the end of the day, I wouldn't worry about it. I am very ready to go to Washington and fight about this performance metric because there's several reasons why it's not a good metric. But we'll move on. Oh, here's where I get salty about the metric. So this is a USDOL requirement. The core goals of WIOA have not changed. Attempt to assist the participants with finding the best employment opportunities. So what I'm saying there is if you have a client who is working at a job 6 months out and they contact you, you're going to follow up and they're like, well, I just got a job offer. They're going to pay me $5 more an hour, or I get to work from home, or they have on-site childcare and I've got 4 kids. Tell them, great job. Well done. That's excellent. Those types of benefits compute to real dollars, right? And they improve the quality of life of our clients. So even though it's technically going to be a miss on retention with the same employer, you're doing the right thing, which is far more important. So like I said, the core goal of WIOA has not changed. We are still attempting to match these participants with the best employment opportunities available to them. And here's how you protect yourself. Once you make that call and you find out they're working somewhere else for more money or better benefits or whatever, simply create a case note. If you have a case note in there explaining why they did not retain with the same employer, I will be reading that and I will use that as evidence when I march on Washington and explain to them why this one doesn't make any sense, right? Higher wages, better advancement opportunities, benefits, fringes, all that good stuff, health insurance. Like there are plenty of good reasons not to stay with the same employer, right, at the end of the day. All right, let's move into secondary performance. So participants served, this one is, as it reads, it's just anybody who receives a service is counted towards participants served. Our participation numbers are sharply dropping. They're dropping more than our funding is dropping, which is not okay. I'm not, me and Tammy have been looking into this. We've been investigating this. Tammy's been put on a committee that's reassessing performance goals for all agencies in the state, all workforce agencies in the state. And this is something we're going to bring up to them. At some point, there is going to be a requirement for how many participants you serve, or at the very least, a requirement for continual improvement that you increase the participants you serve, or at least, the very least, that you're not serving fewer and fewer participants every year. This is statewide. This isn't SWAPTE in particular. I think I can't honestly remember specifically what SWAPTE's numbers are doing. But just be mindful, you need to serve a good number of people. You need to do the good work, right? I think SWAPTE is one of the few that are not dropping as much. I'd have to check it, and I'm trying to get us out to lunch in 8 minutes, so we're going to move on. Training-related deployment, it is what it says. It just is saying that, if, for example, if a client went into a CDL program, that they're a truck driver. If they went to a nursing program, that they're working in a hospital, right? It's as simple as that. We use ONET codes to monitor that. So make sure that you review your ONET codes when you're establishing one of these trainings or when you're doing your follow-up with the employment. Make sure that they match. There is a handy hyperlink that will show you in the demo that will show you if the employment ONET code and the training ONET code are the same. So we'll look at that. And youth placement education. So essentially, if a youth is not found to be working at the second quarter after exit, but you have indicated that they've been placed in secondary or post-secondary training or occupational skills training, they still count as a success. So the placement screen for youth is one that apparently gets skipped a lot. We've seen that screen not filled out, and then there's a case note for follow-up saying, oh, well, they're at Troy University now, or they're at Justice Healthcare or whatever, right? Please put that placement screen in. That's going to boost your ERQ2 number. Because essentially the system's saying, oh, well, that's a youth, they're not working, but I see the good case manager here has put in that they're at some school or at some trade program or some occupational skills training, right? I'm going to give them a success instead of a failure. So do fill that out. This is a FYI informational slide, performance reporting timeline for the annual reports. I just wanted you guys to see a small glimpse of the nightmare that is my life, because when I submit performance every quarter, this is how the performance is broken down. So if you'll notice, for example, on July 1st of last year, when I submitted the annual performance, right? When I was submitting for participants served and measurable skills gains, it was easy. It was July of 2023 to June of 2024. But once you start getting into employment and then, God forbid, credentials, things start getting a little wacky. Suddenly, we're looking an entire year behind for employment and median earnings, or in the case of credentials, we're looking 18 months behind. There are several good reasons why it is set up like this. It's not one of those things where I can gripe on the federal government for doing something wrong. This is the correct way to do it, but it does make things kind of confusing. So when you get a performance report, I put what we call the cohort, which is very simply the reporting period, right? For each one of these performance measurements, you will see the cohort next to it. That describes the point in time that that performance is calculated. So I do everything I can to make those reports readable and simple. But at the end of the day, it's math, right? It's not going to be super simple or super readable, right? But I'm doing what I can. So now you can kind of see why that is, why those cohorts are ranging so wildly. All right. It doesn't mean the data is not real time. It is real time data. It just means that we've cohorted it out. So, for example, that we have enough time to do the follow up, right? Have enough time to give the participant time to find a job or to get their credential, right? All that good stuff. All right. Finally, this is the last important slide, is the QRA. I mentioned the QRA. I wanted to talk about it here today because this is the reason why we started this training. In addition to all of the fun audits I have to do on a quarterly basis, the federal government decided people like me were too bored and started publishing what's called the QRA, the Quarterly Reporting Analysis. Essentially, this is a data audit. So if you look at, these are the items that are on the QRA, and if you look at them, you're going to notice this is really technical stuff, right? This is looking at things like priority of service, are your codes correct, training completion rate, which is the prime offender here, the accuracy of our dates, the records added, records dropped. That's like talking about voids versus like when we have to post, like every time you send something to Cecily or Kristen, can you backdate this service? Can you change the service date for me? Just so you know, that's getting on this report. The feds are seeing it. I'm seeing it. We're having to review it. So try to do it correctly the first time, right? Try your best. Obviously, it's going to happen, right? But try your best to get it correct the first time. It's not that we mind fixing it. It's that now the feds are looking at it, right? And it's something that they can point out as an issue. And I see Laura typing something. We are done for today. So if you have a question, you go ahead and raise your hand, type it in the chat, and we can answer all the questions, and then we will go out to lunch. Yes, Laura, I can see you typing in the chat. So. I assume you're just going to tell me what a great job I did, so, and how much you like my best. I really wish you had video right now. Employment information that we have must be reported in the follow-up tabs. Yes, yes, it must. I feel like there's a motive. I feel like there's a agenda to this question, but I'll humor it. Yes, the employment information that you have must be reported in the follow-up tabs. Absolutely, it certainly must. If we needed someone else besides Laura to say it, which I feel like might be the motivation, yes, it really does. Because wage matching is not a perfect process, right? If you know anything about the ADOL LMI division that handles all the wage matching, then you probably understand what I'm talking about. It's not as precise as we seem to think it is. It is not a given and it's not guaranteed. So make sure you get that follow-up done. All right. So we do still have a quick mini demo. I'm not going to do the 3-hour lead you through every step of the way kind of thing. I just want to show you some relevant things, but I think this would be a great time to break for lunch. And we're kind of on time. So Laura, Susan, I'll put it to y'all once again. We can either do an hour for lunch and come back at 1, and then we'd probably be finished about 2 o'clock. Or if you guys want to take a longer lunch break, we can come back at 1:30 and be finished about 2:30. So totally, Laura, totally up to you and Susan, whatever y'all want to do.
Hey, I turned to Laura to give us some advice on this.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
saying, I'll say 1:30.
Laura says, let's get steak for lunch. So we will, that sounds good, which sounds good to me. So let's come back for at 1:30, try to be on time, just, because my plan is to get in, quickly show you some areas of the system, and then let's get out and we can finish all the other work that's probably piling up. So, all right, guys, so I will see y'all at 1:30.
Great, thanks, Kevin.